So in this video, we're going to learn about multiple representations. To start off with, we've got some vocab words. The first vocab word is going to be rate of change. So rate of change is a number that the y values are increasing by for this case. We're going to learn more about rate of change further on, and it's going to mean something different. For right now, we only care about what the y values are increasing or decreasing by. Your initial value is going to be your starting point. That can also be called figure 0. That can also be called the y-intercept. It's also the value when x equals 0. I'll go ahead and say when x equals 0. So it's the value when x equals 0. Okay. Some other vocab words I added are domain and range. Domain are the x values, and range are the y values. Okay, so I did add that to your paper. So please go ahead and add those to your paper. So those are the four main vocab words. We're going to talk about rate of change, we're going to talk about initial value, and we are going to talk about domain and range. All right. In multiple representations. So the directions just want you to find the domain, range, rate, and initial value. So I want to find those four vocab words for the patterns below. Number 1 and number 2 and number 3, they are called sequences. So a sequence is just a number separated by a comma. Okay? Notice that you only have one set of numbers in a sequence. So you're going to have to say this is my first number, my second number, my third number, my fourth number, and my fifth number to get two sets of numbers up there. The numbers that you write are called the domain. And then that means the number up here, I'll write that in green. Those numbers are called the range. Okay? So yes, you're going to have to rewrite those. So when you rewrite them, you're going to say the domain equals, you write this little squiggly bracket, and then you list the numbers with commas. And then squiggly bracket. Same thing for range. You're going to list your numbers 7, 5, 3, 1, -1 in brackets. Okay? So labeling domain and range is not enough. You are going to have to rewrite them. Okay? Next thing you have to do, oh no. The next thing you have to do is find the rate of change. To find the rate of change, you need to see what these y values are either going up or down by. Okay? So how are they going 7, 5, 3, 1, -1? I can tell they're going down, and so that's why it is a negative number. And to find the rate, you're going to pick a number and subtract it from the one before it. So I would do, for example, 3 minus 5 and get -2. So that is my rate. I can also check it with another number, for example, and do 5 minus 7. I would still get -2. So to find the rate of change, you pick a number and subtract it by the one before it. All right, lastly, the initial value. So for initial value, you need to find the value when x equals 0, and I have when x equals 1. So I need to go backwards in my pattern, and since they were subtracting 2 each time, to go backwards, you're going to do the opposite and add 2. So 7 plus 2 is actually going to be a 9. So your initial value should be a U. You can abbreviate that IV is going to be a 9. So in sequences, you do have to go backwards, and so they're subtracting 2. So I would go backwards and add 2 from this number and get 9. So my initial value would be a 9. Okay? So that is how you find domain, range, and initial value and rate from a sequence. So why don't you press pause and try number 2 and try number 3. Let's talk about number 2. I wrote the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like last time for my domain. So my domain was numbers 1 through 5. My range, I just rewrote these numbers on top. To find your rate, you need to see what they're going up or down by. So notice we keep getting bigger negatives, which is a key word that you are subtracting. Okay, so if you keep getting into further negatives, you are subtracting. Again, you pick a number and subtract the one before it. So I picked negative 11 and I subtracted negative 6. Notice this will give you a plus, and so negative 11 plus 6 is negative 5. You can always double check your answers and do negative 11 minus 5 and make sure you get negative 16 and keep that going. So your rate was a negative 5. To find your initial value, you had to do the opposite of a negative 5, which was add 5 to this number right here. Negative 6 plus 5 was a negative 1. On number 3, again, I added the domain 1 through 5. That will always be the case with the sequence. Your range will always be the numbers they give you. To find the rate, I started with negative 27, and I subtracted the one before it, negative 18. Notice 2 negatives will give you a plus, and so that is why you get a negative 9. You also know it's negative because they are getting further into their negative numbers. Your initial value, you had to do the opposite of subtracting a 9, which would be add 9. Negative 18 plus 9 is negative 9. Okay? So now let's look at some tables. Domain and range are pretty easy to find in a table. So these numbers are your domain. And then your y values are your range. So I would need to write out domain. Yes, I know this is a lot of work. Negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. For your range, you are going to have to write out negative 6, negative 3, 0, 3, and 6. Okay? So domain are the x values and range are the y values, okay? Once you do that, you need to find your rate of change. To do that, you're going to see what they're going up or down by each time. If the negatives confuse you, you can jump to these positives. How do you get to from a 3 to a 6? Well, you're going to add 3. Again, you can pick a number and subtract the one before it. So I could have done 3 minus 0 and got 3. So they are adding 3 each time. So my rate of change is going to be a 3. Then you need to find your initial value. To do that in a table, you need to see when x equals 0. And in this case, they gave it to us. So here is when x is 0. So right here is my initial value. So my initial value would be negative 3 because that is the value of y when x equals a 0. Okay? So that is how you find rate, initial value, domain, and range from a table. Why don't you try 5 and 6 and press pause. Number 5, I rewrote my domain and I rewrote my range down here. To find the rate, I had to see what they were going up by. So you pick a number, for example 13, and subtract 7 and get 6. I made sure that worked. I made sure 1 plus 6 was 7, so that did work out. So your rate is a 6. For initial value, once again, they gave us x equals 0, so I'm going to see where x equals 0 go over, and it's negative 5. So negative 5 was your initial value. If they, for example, did not give you this right here, if they did not give you that value in a table, you would have to go backwards and go backwards. And so 1 minus 6 would be a negative 5. So if they do not give you x equals 0 in a table, but they do give you the 1 value, you're going to have to go backwards like in a sequence and do the opposite of adding 6 and subtract 6 to get that value of a negative 5. But that's only if they do not give you x equals 0. On number 6, domain or range, I repeated. I saw that they were adding 5, or you could have done 4 minus negative 1 to get a positive 5. So they were increasing by 5. Again, initial value, they gave it to you right here, so you just write 4. Okay, so that's how you find rate and initial value from a table. Let's look at our last one, almost last one, which is ordered pairs. So when you have an ordered pair, the first numbers are your x values, and the second number are your y values. So for domain, you're going to say -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. For the range, it's going to be your second number in the order pair. So 6, 4, 2, 0, -2. To find the rate, you need to see what's happening with this range. So are they adding or subtracting? They're going to be subtracting because those numbers are getting smaller, and they're subtracting 2 each time. Okay? To find the initial value, I need to see when x equals 0. So here is when x equals 0, this point up here. So that means your initial value would be a 4. Okay, so once again, it's pretty easy if they give you the initial value. So why don't you try number 8 and number 9 on your own and press pause. Number 8, again for the domain, it's your first number that you see. So it's going to be -4, -3, 2, 1, and 0. For range, it's your second number. So notice it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So we have a lot of 3's. So instead of writing 3 over and over and over again, you could just say the domain is a 3, because it was just that one number. So to find the rate, notice they're not adding anything. They're adding 0, they're adding 0, they're adding 0. So your rate of change would be a 0. There was nothing they were going up by. For the initial value, you're going to see when x is 0, and they gave it to you here, so it's going to be an initial value of a 3. On number 9, again, you're going to rewrite the first numbers you see for domain. You're going to write the second numbers for your range. Then you're going to look at this range and see what they're going up by. When you look at these, you notice they're getting closer to 0, and then they start going up, so they are adding. If you want to take a look at the positive numbers, it's probably easier to see how you go from a 1 to a 9. Well, you're going to add 8. If you cannot see that, remember you're going to pick a number. So for example, -7, and you're going to subtract the one before it. You know 2 negatives are a positive, and so -7 plus 15 is an 8. So that's how you find the rate. Initial value, once again, they gave it to us. It's when x is 0. It's your y value. Last ones. We are not going to explain that because we have not gotten to patterns yet. But you are going to find the rate of change in the initial value, and we can also do domain and range. So in an equation, these kind of look like y equals mx plus b, which was the equation of a line, which we'll get to in the future. The number in front of the x is the rate. The number on the end is the initial value. Okay, so for number 10, your rate is going to be a -5. It's not -5x, it's just -5. Your initial value is the number on the end, so an 8. For domain and range, domain and range for equations are always all real numbers. To draw that, you would draw an R with a line through it, and that stands for all real numbers. So equations, domain and range will have all real numbers in all these instances. So why don't you press pause and try number 11 and 12. Tell me the rate, the initial value, the domain, and the range. 11, my rate was a -9. My initial value was a 7. The domain is all real numbers, and the range is all real numbers. On 12, the rate is a 4. Initial value is a 3. And again, domain and range are all real numbers for equations of lines. So that is a review, or not a review, an introduction to domain, range, rate, and initial value. So thank you for watching. If you have a question, let me know. But now you can start practicing.